The island of Sodor is surrounded by beautiful blue seas. It has fields of green and sandy yellow beaches. There are rivers, streams, and lots of trees where the birds sing. There are windmills and coal mines and docks where visitors to the island arrive. The island also has lots and lots of railway lines. Sentient locomotives with faces on their smoke boxes known as engines roam the rails. It is their job to keep the railway running. From carrying passengers to delivering goods, the engines all want to be really useful. Welcome to the Island of Sodor. Thomas and Friends Retold. Episode 1. The Adventure Begins. Once upon a time, there was a little railway known as the Northwestern. There lived a little blue tender engine named Edward. He was number 2 and lived at Tidmouth sheds with 3 other engines. Gordon, who was blue and number 4, and Henry, who was green and number 3, were bigger than him. And James, who was black and number 5, was slightly bigger than Edward. Gordon often boasted about the fact that he was bigger than Edward. He said, "Huh, the driver won't choose you again. He wants big and strong engines like me." Edward hadn't been out for a long time, and he began to feel sad. Henry had empathy for him and was upset that Gordon boasted about his beliefs. Just then, Edward's driver and fireman came along to start work. The driver looked at Edward and said, "What's the matter? Are you feeling sad?" Would you like to come out today?" And Edward said, "Oh, yes, please." So the fireman lit the fire in his firebox and made a nice lot of steam. Then the driver pulled the lever, and Edward puffed away and blew his whistle. "Look at me! Look at me!" he said. Gordon was cross about being left behind, while Henry was proud of Edward's departure, and he went away to get some coaches. At last, Edward found the coaches, and they said, "Oh, please be careful, Edward. Don't bump and bang us like Gordon and James do." So Edward reversed to the coaches very, very gently, and the shunter fastened the coupling. The coaches were very pleased. "Thank you, Edward. That was kind. We're glad you're taking us today." Then they went to the station, where the people were waiting. Here we are. Come along. Get in quickly, please," said Edward. So the people got in quickly, and Edward waited for the guard to blow his whistle and wave his green flag. He waited and waited, but there was no whistle and no green flag. Edward was getting anxious. "Where is the guard?" he asked. The driver and fireman asked the station master, "Have you seen the guard?" "No." They then asked the porter, "Have you seen the guard?" "Yes, last night." Edward began to get cross. "Are we ever going to start?" he asked impatiently. Just then, a little boy shouted, "Here he comes!" And there the guard was, running down the hill, with flags in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He ran onto the platform, blew his whistle, and jumped into his brake van. Edward then puffed off whistling. Here we go, he said. Edward did have a happy day. All the children ran to wave as he went past, and he met old friends at all the stations, including Glynn the vertical boiler engine, aka the coffee pot. "Hello, Glynn," said Edward. "Hello, Edward. Long time no see. How are things on the branch line?" asked Glynn. "Things are going smoothly," replied Edward. "It's good to see you again." "Always nice to see you too," replied Glynn. "I better get going. See you later," said Edward as he continued carrying passengers. Edward worked so hard that the driver promised to take him out again the next day. And Edward told the other engines at Tidmouth sheds that night, "I'm going out again tomorrow. What do you think of that?" Henry was happy for him, but Edward didn't hear what James and Gordon thought, for he was so tired and happy that he fell asleep at once. Once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. It went into a tunnel and squeaked out of its funnel, and wouldn't come out again. The engine's name was Henry. He was an express engine. His driver and fireman argued with him, but he would not move. "The rain will spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes," he said. The passengers got off and argued with him too, but he wouldn't move, even after the rain had stopped. The conductor blew his whistle until he had no more breath, and waved his flag until his arms ached. But Henry stayed in the tunnel and blew steam at him. "I'm not going to spoil my lovely green paint and red stripes for you," he said. Then along came Sir Topham Hatt, a.k.a. the Fat Controller, the man in charge of all the engines on the Island of Sodor. And it was his job to make sure all the trains ran on time. "We will pull you out," he said, but Henry only blew steam at him. Sir Topham Hatt told the guard to get a rope, and everyone pulled except Sir Topham Hatt because, "My doctor has forbidden me to pull," he said. But still, Henry stayed in the tunnel. When pulling didn't work, they tried pushing from the other end. Sir Topham Hatt said, "1, 2, 3, push! Everybody push! Harder! Come on! You can do it! Put your backs into it!" And they did, but he didn't help because, "My doctor has also forbidden me to push." The passengers pushed and pushed and pushed. But still, Henry stayed in the tunnel. They even tried pushing with James. He pushed and puffed and pushed as hard as ever he could, but still, Henry stayed in the tunnel with his brakes on. Nothing had worked. The efforts had failed successfully. Even Sir Topham Hatt gave up. "Very well then," he said. "We shall take away your rails, and leave you here for always and always and always, until you're ready to come out of the tunnel." They took up the old rails and built a brick wall in front of Henry, so that other engines wouldn't bump into him. It took a while, but the wall was finished, and the workmen left him there. All Henry could do was watch the trains rushing through the other tunnel. He was sad, because no one would ever see his lovely green paint and red stripes again. As time went on, Edward, Gordon, and James would often pass by. Edward would whistle and say, "Hello!" while Gordon and James would whistle and say, "Serves you right!" Poor Henry had no steam to answer. His fire had gone out. Soot and dirt from the tunnel had spoiled his lovely green paint and red stripes anyway. But the real question, in my opinion, is, did Henry deserve such a punishment? Well, I'll let you decide on that. Gordon was an express engine who was very big, very proud, and very fast. He always pulled the big express, and he was proud of being the only engine strong enough to do so. It was full of important people, like Sir Topham Hatt, and they were seeing how fast Gordon could go. "Hurry, hurry, hurry," he said. Trickety trock, said the coaches. In a minute, Gordon would see Henry's tunnel where he stood there, bricked up and lonely. "Oh, dear, why did I worry about rain spoiling my lovely green paint and red stripes? I'd like to come out of the tunnel." But Henry didn't know how to ask. "I'm going to whistle at Henry," said Gordon. He was almost there when shh, something went burst, and there was proud Gordon going slower and slower in a cloud of steam. His driver stopped the train near Henry. "Oh, dear, what has happened to me?" asked Gordon. "I feel so weak." "You burst your safety valve," said the driver. "I'm afraid you can't pull the train anymore." "Oh, the indignity," said Gordon. "We were going so nicely, too. And look, there's Henry laughing at me." Everyone got out of the coaches to see Gordon. "Huh," said Sir Topham Hatt. "I never liked these big engines, always going wrong. Send another engine at once." While the conductor went to find one, they uncoupled Gordon from the coaches, and he had enough puff to slink onto a siding out of the way. Edward was the only engine available. I'll come and try, he said, and he was on his way. When he arrived, Gordon said, "Pooh, that's no use. Edward can't push the train." Kind Edward buffered up to the coaches from behind. He puffed and pushed and pushed and puffed, but he couldn't move the heavy coaches. "I told you so," said Gordon. "Why not let Henry try?" "Yes," said Sir Topham Hatt, "I will." He then went up to Henry. "Will you pull this train, Henry?" he asked him. "Oh, yes," he replied. The workmen began to deconstruct the wall. "Have a nice run to ease your joints and find a turntable," said Sir Topham Hatt. "Yes, sir," replied Henry. When he had got up steam, Henry puffed out, dirty with cobwebs. "Oh, I'm stiff, he groaned. When Henry came back after a good run, he felt much better. Then they coupled him up. "I'm ready," whistled Edward. "So am I," replied Henry. "Pull hard and we'll do it! Pull hard and we'll do it!" They puffed together. Gordon watched as the train was leaving. "We've done it together! We've done it together!" said Edward and Henry. "You've done it, hooray! You've done it, hooray!" sang the coaches. Everyone was proud and excited. Sir Topham Hatt leaned out of the window to wave at Edward and Henry, but the train was going so fast that his hat blew off into a field where a goat ate it for tea. They never stopped until they came to Wellsworth, the station at the end of the line. The passengers all said thank you, and Sir Topham Hatt promised Henry a new coat of paint. "Would you like blue paint with red stripes for a change?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. "Oh, yes, please," replied Henry. "Then I'll be like Edward and Gordon. That will be nice." On their way home, Edward and Henry helped Gordon to the Sodor steamworks, and all three engines are now great friends. And Henry was repainted blue. Wasn't he pleased when he had his new coat? He was very proud of it, as all good engines are. Henry was still scared of the rain, though. When Edward, Gordon, and Henry asked James about changing his paint to blue like them, he heavily disagreed and said that black made him look splendid. Edward was the smallest engine, and he helped with shunting cars and coaches in the yard near Knapford Station for the bigger engines. Gordon loved pulling the express, but he didn't care much for some of his other jobs. Right now, he was pulling a goods train, the shame of it, oh, the shame of it, he complained. "Oh, Gordon," said Edward, "it can't be that bad." "Yes, it is," replied Gordon. "I am a very important engine, but thankfully, I won't have to pull goods trains for long, not after the new engine gets here." "New engine? What new engine?" asked Edward. "Sir Topham Hatt is getting another new engine," replied Gordon. "That last one he got with the wooden brake blocks was much too small to be really useful." And that was when he showed up. "But I'm not small," he said. "James," said Gordon, annoyed. "I might not be as big as you, Gordon, but I'm slightly bigger than Edward. And there's nothing wrong with wooden brake blocks either," he said. "Unless they catch fire, of course," said Gordon. "Can you move on now, please, James? You're blocking my way." And James did. So Gordon was on his way again. James was annoyed. "My brakes don't catch fire. They're just as good as yours," he said to Gordon, pulling away. Gordon didn't like pulling heavy goods trains, but he especially didn't like pulling them up the big hill on the main line. Gordon struggled to get up the hill. He got slower and slower until he gave up halfway up. "What's he up to now?" asked Gordon's driver. He got off his cab and said, "Come on, Gordon, you're not even trying." "Huh," replied Gordon. "I can't do it. Those noisy cars hold an engine back. If they were coaches, now that would be different." Sir Topham Hatt got a call about the situation, so he went to Edward. "Hello, Edward. I'm afraid Gordon needs your help," he said. "My help, sir? Are you sure?" asked Edward. "Yes. He can't get up the hill with his goods cars, apparently," said Sir Topham Hatt. Edward whistled. "Okay, sir. I'm on my way," he said, leaving the yard. Gordon was still struggling to pull the goods train up the hill when Edward arrived to help. Edward whistled. "Hello, Gordon. I've come to push." "Huh, no use at all. A small engine like you," said Gordon. Edward wanted to prove him wrong, so he buffered up to the train and pushed. He was doing all the work. "Oh, please, Gordon, try," said Edward. All right. So Gordon pulled, and Edward pushed with all their strength up the hill. "I can't do it," moaned Gordon. "I will do it," said Edward. "I can't do it. I will do it. I can't do it. I will do it." And before they knew it, they were at the top of the hill. "I've done it! I've done it! I've done it!" said Gordon, happily racing down the hill, whistling. "I knew I could do it," he said, leaving Edward behind. "Not even so much as a thank you," frowned Edward. Later, Edward was back in the yard when he heard a voice he had never heard before. "Excuse me, can you tell me where Knapford is?" he asked. "But this is Knapford," replied James. "Where are you from?" "Oh, right. On the mainland," the voice replied. Edward gasped. "Sir Topham Hatt's new engine!" he said in excitement. When he went by James to see the new engine, Edward couldn't believe his eyes. The engine was a green tank engine who had 6 small wheels, a short stumpy boiler, a short stumpy dome, and a short stumpy funnel. He had LBSC 70 written on the sides. "Hello," the engine said to Edward. "What's the matter? Do I have soot on my face?" "No," replied Edward. "It's just, well, you're not a big engine." "Yes, I am," said the engine. James giggled. "No, you're not." "Well, I was big enough to do my work on the mainland," the engine said, puffing away. Wait! All I meant was, you're not as big as I am," said Edward. "I may not be as big as you, but I'm very hard-working," said the engine. Just then, Gordon came along laughing. "And who are you?" he asked. "I'm Thomas, the new engine," said Edward after the engine introduced himself. "Oh, dear," said Gordon. "Sir Topham Hatt must have made a terrible mistake. I think he was expecting someone really useful." "I am really useful," replied Thomas. Gordon laughed at his statement. "For fetching coaches, perhaps." "Oh well, if you stick around long enough, you might be lucky enough to see me pulling the express," he whistled. "That would be a fine sight for you," and he puffed away. Thomas felt miserable. "Sorry about Gordon, Thomas," said Edward. "I'm afraid he's often like that. I'm Edward, by the way." "And I'm James." Hello, said Sir Topham Hatt, coming to greet Thomas. "You must be Thomas, my new tank engine. Welcome to Sodor. I am Sir Topham Hatt, the man in charge." "Pleased to meet you," replied Thomas. Sir Topham Hatt then frowned and cleared his throat. Thomas was confused. "Sir, you're supposed to call him Sir," whispered Edward. "Oh, I'm pleased to meet you, Sir," said Thomas. "I'm very pleased to meet you too," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "Now, as you can see, I'm a very busy man, and this is a very busy railway, so I expect you to make yourself really useful right away. Edward will show you what to do." And Sir Topham Hatt left. Shortly after, Thomas went to work. He was clumsy, bumping into cars, and was in James' way by accident at Knapford. "Oh, that's very useful, isn't it?" said Gordon, "having another small engine to get in the way." "He's still learning, Gordon," said Edward. "I'm just showing him what to do." Thomas was in Gordon's way. He tried to get out of it as Gordon left the platform, but Thomas almost ran into Henry's train coming by. Thomas chuckled nervously. As he worked, Thomas wouldn't look where he was going or where he was. Sometime later, Thomas and Edward were watching Gordon napping on a siding. Watch this, Thomas said to Edward, approaching Gordon. Thomas whistled loudly. Wake up, lazy boiler! Why don't you work hard like me for a change? You can't catch me! Shouted Thomas. He and Edward had a good laugh. Oh, the indignity, moaned Gordon. That night, it was about to rain, and Thomas was the smallest engine at Tidmouth Sheds. But at least his new friend Edward was there, too. I like being on Sodor, Edward, said Thomas. I just can't wait until I get to pull trains. Said James. You better learn how to shunt cars and coaches first, Thomas, said Edward. I'll get the hang of shunting soon, Edward, he replied. But I want to see the world, Thomas said, referring to the whole island of Sodor. Gordon groaned. Just then, Henry came in on the turntable to Tidmouth. He began to turn. Faster, faster, faster! Oh, turn, 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 said Henry, anxious. Who's that? Asked Thomas. That's Henry, replied Edward. He's a very kind engine, but he's a bit of a worrier. The thunder clapped as Henry raced into his berth. And he doesn't like rain, Edward continued. At last, it began to rain, and Henry was glad to be in his berth. And so, Edward told Thomas the sad story of Henry. Thomas was shocked when he got to the part where Henry was walled up. But when Edward got to the part where Gordon burst his safety valve, Gordon stopped the story. All right, story time is over. Some of us have to get some sleep. Agreed, said James, and the 5 engines closed their eyes that night. The next day, Sir Topham Hatt sent Thomas to the Sodor Steamworks to be repainted in the colors he liked to see on the Northwestern Railway. Thomas liked the steamworks. There was hustle and bustle, sparks and spanners, and it was lively and friendly. First, the workmen scraped off Thomas's green paint, which tickled him. Soon, he was cloudy silver. The workmen were about to paint Thomas pink. Thomas was confused. By the time they finished painting him pink, the workmen showed Thomas that they were going to paint him blue, meaning that the pink paint was his undercoat. Thomas understood the process. The workmen repainted Thomas, cleaned his lamp, and the final touch was giving him a number. Thomas was given the number 1. The work was finally complete. Thomas whistled and thanked the workmen for all their hard work. A short while later, after he let his paint dry, Thomas went to the yard to show Edward his new livery. Edward! Edward! He shouted excitedly. Look, Edward, look! I'm blue, just like you! Edward chuckled. And also like Gordon and Henry. You're also number 1. Thomas gasped with excitement. Does that mean I'm the best? He asked. Gordon and James came into the yard. The last number 1 was a coffee pot, said James. Coffee pot? Asked Thomas. Coffee pot is just a nickname for an engine with a boiler that points up in the air, like those things people make coffee in, said Edward. The coffee pot engines used to look after one of the branch lines, but they don't work there now, continued Edward. Although, I think the last one might still be on a siding. It had been some time since Edward saw Glynn on his day out. Stop chatting and bring me my coaches, Gordon whistled impatiently. James whistled too, and the 2 engines left the yard. You better do it, Thomas. I have a train to pull today, said Edward. But I thought we were going to be working together, said Thomas sadly. We are, just not all the time, replied Edward. Gordon whistled impatiently. My coaches, he shouted. And Edward left the yard with his train, and Thomas went to fetch Gordon's coaches. Thomas found 2 sleeping orange coaches with 1 face on each end. He coupled up to them and pulled them out of the siding. It woke them up. Oh! I say, where are you taking us? Asked one of the coaches. To Gordon. It's time for the express, replied Thomas. But we're not the express coaches, they replied in sync. I'm Annie, and she is Clarabel, said Annie. And the express coaches are on the other sidings, said Clarabel. Gordon's coaches all agreed with Annie and Clarabel. Thomas felt silly. Oh, I'm terribly sorry, your ladyships, replied Thomas, moving them back into the siding. You see, I'm new around here. I'm Thomas. He whistled, leaving the two coaches. Oh, what a sweet little engine, said Annie. Indeed, Annie. Delightful, replied Clarabel. He'll go far, Clarabel. Just you wait and see, said Annie. Thomas fetched Gordon's coaches, and the express was underway. Thomas wasn't used to working in the yard on his own. It was very busy all day long. He was still clumsy and bumped into cars and coaches. That evening, Thomas was filling up trucks with coal in the yard when James showed up with Annie and Clarabel showing off. Here's James, he said. Oh, James! Careful, said Annie as she and Clarabel were biffed and bashed. They were James's coaches. Thomas began to smell smoke. Do you smell something smoky, James? Like a burning smell? He asked. No. Not really. Nothing out of the ordinary, replied James. He uncoupled from Annie and Clarabel and left the yard. By the time Thomas finished filling up the trucks with coal, he saw Henry filling up with water. Hello, Thomas. Hello, Henry, they greeted each other. Henry, can I ask you something? Did you really hide in a tunnel because of some rain? Asked Thomas. Yes, Thomas, I did, replied Henry. But rain is just water, the same as you put it in your boiler, said Thomas. So how could you be afraid of it? I don't want my lovely blue paint and red stripes to be spoiled. I don't like being teased about it, replied Henry. But I'm not teasing, Henry. I was just asking, said Thomas. I mean, you can't stop the rain, and you don't want to go around worrying all the time. I don't worry all the time, Thomas, whistled Henry. I hardly worry at all when it's sunny. And he puffed away. Thomas was confused, but he and the other engines returned to Tidmouth sheds for the night. The next morning, Thomas found it hard to wake up. His fire went out, and there wasn't enough steam. Henry whistled to wake Thomas up. You need to wake up, Thomas. It's nearly time for the express, he said. Gordon will be waiting for his coaches. At last, when his driver and fireman put some shovels of coal in his firebox, Thomas started. Oh dear, must get going, said Thomas, leaving Tidmouth sheds quickly. Gordon was waiting for his coaches at Knapford impatiently. Hurry up, you, he shouted to Thomas. Hurry up yourself, he replied, fetching the coaches. Then, an idea flew into Gordon's funnel and smoke box. Yes, I will, he said. Gordon hadn't forgiven Thomas for waking him up from his nap, and frankly, Thomas never apologized in the first place. Now was the time for Gordon to make his move. He started off so quickly that there wasn't enough time to uncouple Thomas from the coaches. Gordon was pulling the express and Thomas along the branch line. Stop! Stop! Shouted Thomas. Gordon blew his whistle and laughed. Come on, keep up, he said. Poor Thomas was going faster than he'd ever gone before. Stop! Stop! He shouted again. Hurry, 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 said Gordon. He doesn't deserve this! He doesn't deserve this! Said the coaches, feeling bad for Thomas. He was out of breath, and his wheels hurt him, but he had to go on. They passed Edward coming the opposite direction. He was surprised. Express coming through, said Gordon. The train was still going fast until they reached Wellsworth. At last, the train came to a complete stop. Gordon's payback had worked. Thomas was exhausted as he was finally uncoupled from the coaches. Well, little Thomas, now you know what hard work is like, don't you? Said Gordon. The coaches apologized to Thomas as Gordon puffed away with them. Poor Thomas had no steam to respond. He went to a water tower to rest and have a nice long drink. Maybe I don't have to tease Gordon for fun or to feel important, thought Thomas to himself, and he puffed slowly home. The next day, Thomas was back in the yard again. He was cross. "It's not fair," he said. "All the engines pull trains except me. I never go anywhere." Thomas was technically incorrect in my opinion. He was shunting some cars when he saw some unusual-looking ones. "I wonder where those cars are meant to be going," said Thomas. They had a face on each car and were sleeping. Thomas got close to them and said, "Wake up, lazy wheels! Judy, Jerome, emergency!" they said. "Where's the accident? Is an engine off the rails? Or is it a breakdown? A fire? A bridge out?" They panicked. No. I just wondered where you were going, that's all," said Thomas. "Thomas!" called Clarabel nearby. "Over here!" She called Thomas over to her and Annie. "Sorry to disturb you," said Thomas to Judy and Jerome. "Disturb us?" asked Judy. Thomas went to see Annie and Clarabel as Judy and Jerome chattered. "You mustn't touch those cars," said Clarabel. "That's the breakdown train," said Annie. "But why are they in the yard if they're not meant to be shunted?" asked Thomas. "Don't they ever go anywhere?" "Only in emergencies," replied Clarabel. "Like when a poor helpless coach needs lifting back onto the rails," said Annie. Judy and Jerome went back to sleep. "Okay, I won't bother them again, unless it's an emergency," said Thomas. Just then, James went by to show off again. When he applied his brakes, his driving wheels spewed out smoke, but James didn't notice. "Ta-da!" he shouted. "You can take away my cars now, Thomas. I'm ready for my coaches." "Oh!" said Annie and Clarabel in sync. "You're such a show-off, James," said Annie. "Maybe I am," he replied. "But just you wait and see if Sir Topham Hatt doesn't give me my own branch line soon." Suddenly, Thomas began to smell some smoke again. There's that burning smell again," he said. James saw it, but tried to blow it away and pretended that nothing was wrong. The next morning at Tidmouth sheds, Henry wasn't feeling well. He wouldn't come out of the shed. "Is it because you think it might rain, Henry?" asked Thomas. The weather was cloudy that day. "No, Thomas," replied Henry. "I think there's something wrong with my boiler. I might not be able to pull some coaches today." "Maybe your firebox needs warming up," said Thomas. "I'll go fetch your coaches and pull them for today." And he left Tidmouth sheds to do so as Henry was confused. Thomas found the coaches and was pushing them to Knapford Station. He passed by Edward coming the opposite direction. "What are you so happy about today, Thomas?" asked Edward. "If Henry doesn't come, I might get to pull his train," replied Thomas. "It's not as easy as you think, Thomas. Pulling trains is hard work," said Edward. When he made it to Knapford Station, Thomas waited and waited. But still, Henry didn't come. Sir Topham Hatt was getting impatient until he gave up. He turned to one of his assistants and said, "You'll have to find another engine." "There's only Thomas, sir," he said. Thomas smiled big. You'll have to do it then, Thomas," Sir Topham Hatt said. "Be quick now." "Yes, sir! Sir!" said Thomas excitedly. He raced around to the front of the coaches and backed up to them with a bump. "Remember, don't be impatient now, Thomas. Wait until everything is ready," said Sir Topham Hatt. But Thomas was far too excited and not listening. On the furthest platform away from Thomas, Edward was about to pull his goods train. His guard blew the whistle and he set off. Thomas heard it and thought it was time, so he took off as well, before he was coupled up to his coaches and they were left behind. "Thomas, stop! Come back!" shouted Sir Topham Hatt. But even though engines and rolling stock had no ears, Thomas was out of earshot. He was having the time of his life, puffing across the main line. I'm doing it! I'm pulling a train!" said Thomas happily. Just then, James came by pulling a goods train going the opposite direction. "Thomas, where are you going?" he asked. "I thought you were working in the yard. Can't you see him pulling coaches, James?" asked Thomas happily. But James didn't answer him, and he continued to pull his train. "Edward says it's hard to pull trains, but I think it's easy," said Thomas as he continued puffing along the main line. He passed a signal box when some signalmen shouted at him. "They're pleased to see me," assumed Thomas. "They've never seen me pull a train before. It's nice of them to wave." Thomas then spotted a red signal up ahead near another signal box. "Oh, bother," he said. "That red signal means danger. I have to stop." And he did. There was another signalman waiting for him. "Hello, Thomas. What are you doing here?" he asked. "I'm pulling my very first passenger train. Can't you see?" said Thomas. "Really? Then where are your coaches?" asked the signalman. Thomas gasped. "Oh, no!" he said, feeling silly. Back at Nafret Station, the passengers were all talking at once, telling Sir Topham Hatt what a bad railway it was. "Please, everybody, please calm down. We will find another engine as soon as we—" Thomas whistled, coming back into the station. "I'm sorry, sir. I really am," said Thomas. "I did say to wait until everything was ready, Thomas," replied Sir Topham Hatt. This time, Thomas waited to be coupled up and for the passengers to climb on board, which they did. He heard the guards whistle. "Ready?" asked Thomas. "Yes, Thomas. Now we're ready," replied Sir Topham Hatt. And so Thomas began to pull the coaches from station to station. They were heavy, but he pressed on. That night at Tidmouth Sheds, Gordon, James, and Edward thought it was very funny when they heard the story of Thomas's train. When Edward saw Thomas feeling miserable, he stopped laughing. "I'm glad you came to work on our railway, Thomas," said Gordon. "You always give us something funny to laugh about." Thomas sighed. "Sir Topham Hatt will never let me pull trains again," he said sadly. "But I want to go places and do things. I want to see the world," Gordon and James said, finishing Thomas's sentence, and they continued to laugh. "Don't be sad, Thomas," said Edward. "If you really want to go out, why don't you take my goods train tomorrow? I can take over in the yard if you like." "Really? Would you do that for me, Edward?" asked Thomas. Edward chuckled. "Yes, Thomas, I would. Now let's get some sleep, okay?" he said, and the engines closed their eyes. But Thomas opened his back up. "Oh, Edward, I wish it was morning," whispered Thomas before he went to sleep for the night. The next morning, Edward was showing Thomas which cars he should be taking. Thomas could hardly contain his excitement. "Is it these ones?" he asked. "Is it those? Which cars are they, Edward?" "Those cars, Thomas," replied Edward, referring to the ones with faces. "But wait, I need to tell you something I know, Thomas said, interrupting him. "I have to be coupled up before I go. You don't have to tell me. I've learned my lesson." But that wasn't what Edward was going to say. Those cars were known as troublesome trucks who, despite being useful, live up to their name. Thomas reversed and bumped into the trucks hard. "Ow! Oi! Give it a rest!" they said. "Troublesome trucks can play tricks on you, Thomas," said Edward. "It's not the same as in the yard. They'll push you off the rails if you're not careful." "Don't be silly," whistled Thomas. "You worry too much, Edward. Like Henry." "Be careful, Thomas," said Edward. Thomas began to pull the troublesome trucks, but they all pulled back. Thomas had to use all his strength to get the train moving, and he was on his way. Thomas pulled Edward's train along the line. He was happy and thought it was going fine. The trucks all started to moan. They rattled and they groaned. Come along, said Thomas. Before long, Thomas reached Gordon's Hill. It was hard work, but he really had to pull. It didn't help that the trucks pulled back. Soon, Thomas reached the top, so the trucks took advantage and pushed him down the hill. On, faster, faster, they chanted, laughing. They went faster and faster. Thomas tried to apply his brakes, but nothing happened. There was a bend at the bottom of the hill, and the train was tilting to the point where some of the cargo fell out. I had to use the force to keep Thomas and his train balanced. The train was going straight again. Thomas passed Henry pulling his own train, coming back the other way. He was worried. The troublesome trucks didn't care how big the engines were. To them, it was just a game. Thomas was sent to a siding in Marin Station where he slowed the whole train to a complete stop. Sir Topham Hatt just so happened to be there. "Thomas, what are you doing here? And why did you come in so fast?" he asked. "I brought Edward's cars for him, sir, but they were pushing me," replied Thomas. "You've a lot to learn about cars, Thomas," said Sir Topham Hatt. "That's why I asked Edward to bring them, and not you. If you're not prepared to be patient or learn how to do things properly, I'll have to keep you in the shed." Thomas gasped. "No, sir. Please, sir. I want to learn. I want to be a really useful engine," said Thomas. Sir Topham Hatt walked away cross. He wasn't just cross with Thomas, he was cross with Edward too. He told them both that they'd have to stay in the yard until Thomas could learn as much about cars as Edward. Later that day, it was cloudy to the point where it was about to rain at Knapford. Thomas and Edward felt bad there. "I'm sorry, Edward. This is all my fault," said Thomas sadly. "Never mind, Thomas," said Edward. "At least we're working together again." Thomas and Edward smiled. "Who's meant to be taking those coaches?" asked Thomas. The thunder clapped as he saw the raindrops falling outside the station, which could only mean one thing. "Henry!" whistled Thomas as he went to find him. "Thomas, where are you going now?" asked Edward. "You're meant to stay in the yard." But Thomas was already on his way. He hurried back to Tidmouth sheds to find Henry. Some workmen opened one of the berth's doors to reveal a scared Henry. "Henry, your passengers are waiting," said Thomas as he went into his berth. Henry looked up at the ceiling, worried. Then he said, "You take the train, Thomas. You like pulling trains." "No, Henry, it's your train," replied Thomas. "And besides, Edward and I have to stay in the yard." "Well, I have to stay in the shed," said Henry. "It's raining, Thomas. A lot." "But Henry," said Thomas, "don't you want to pull your train? Don't you want to hurry along the tracks like Gordon?" "No," said Henry. "It will spoil my lovely blue paint and red stripes." "It's only water, Henry," said Thomas. "Come on, just little drops of water." "That's what rain is, water." "Like what I put in my boiler?" asked Henry. "Exactly," said Thomas. "Your passengers are waiting, Henry." Thomas went out of the shed to demonstrate that it was okay. "See? Only water. It washes right off," he said. Henry chuckled, but he was still nervous. He gave it a try anyway. He then felt better and whistled. "Only water," he said. "Just water." Henry was laughing with excitement and went to pull his train. Thanks to Thomas's efforts, Henry didn't mind the rain now. He knew that the best way to keep his paint nice was not to seek shelter, but to ask his driver to rub him down when the day's work was over. The next day, Thomas worked hard in the yard. He knew that he wasn't as clever as he had thought. Besides, he wanted to learn all about cars and coaches to be a really useful engine. Thomas was with Edward. "Sir Topham Hatt is coming by this afternoon, Thomas, to see how you're getting on," said Edward. "I'm getting on okay now, aren't I?" asked Thomas. "Of course you are," replied Edward. "I think you nearly know as much about cars as I do now." The two engines agreed with each other. Suddenly, they heard something in the distance. "Shh! Can you hear that?" asked Edward. The sound got louder and louder. And then there was trouble. "Help! Help! They're pushing me! They're pushing me!" It was James. He was being pushed by the troublesome trucks he was pulling. His driving wheels were spewing out smoke. On! Faster! Faster!" the trucks chanted, laughing. James flew by Edward and Thomas. They were surprised. "James!" shouted Thomas as he went after him. "Thomas, come back!" shouted Edward. but Thomas had a train to save. James raced along the line with the troublesome trucks pushing him. "Oh, dear!" he shouted. On, faster, faster!" the truck shouted. "I don't want to go any faster! Help! Help!" shouted James. He tried to brake, but his driving wheels sparked and continued to spew out smoke. Thomas caught up to James. "Thomas!" shouted James. "Use your brakes, James! Use your brakes!" he shouted. "I can't! My brake blocks are on fire!" replied James. "They're made of wood!" Fire spewed out and hit Thomas. He then had a plan. "I'm going to couple up behind you, James!" shouted Thomas. "I'm going to try and slow you down!" And Thomas went to the back of the train. "Hurry, Thomas!" shouted James. "Hurry, hurry, hurry!" chanted the trucks. Thomas switched tracks to get behind the train. He then called out to James's guard in the brake van. Couple me up! Couple me up! I need to slow James down!" "Right," he said. So he got his hook ready, and Thomas got close to the brake van. The guard tried to couple Thomas up, but missed. "Oh no! Try again! Try again!" shouted Thomas. "Right." And he tried again. "We mustn't give up! We have to try!" shouted Thomas. He hit a tree branch, causing him to fall behind a bit. "Faster! Faster!" the guard shouted. But before they tried again, James was hitting a sharp bend. The train tilted. "I'm coming off the rails!" shouted James. And his train tipped over and slid across a field, kicking up rocks and dirt. Thomas screeched to a halt. Everything was quiet. Dirt clouds filled the air. Luckily, James's guard, driver, and fireman weren't hurt, but Thomas's plan to save James failed successfully. "Edward was right. Cars can run an engine right off the rails," said Thomas, devastated at the scene. He saw that James had survived the crash and also felt miserable. Then, an idea flew into Thomas's funnel and smoke box. "Stay right there, James. I'll go and get help," he said as he puffed away. At the yard, Sir Topham Hatt was with Edward when they saw Thomas puff by in a hurry. "Was that Thomas?" asked Sir Topham Hatt. Thomas buffered up to Judy and Jerome. "Wake up! Wake up! Emergency! Emergency!" shouted Thomas. "Judy, Jerome, emergency!" they said. Some workmen were watching. "James is off the line! His brakes were on fire!" shouted Thomas. "Right! We're ready! Crew up!" they said. The workmen got on board Judy and Jerome, and they coupled up Thomas to them, and he was off. Sir Topham Hatt was confused. "Thomas, what do you think?" "Sorry, sir, but this is an emergency," explained Thomas as he left the yard with Judy and Jerome. Edward and Sir Topham Hatt were confused. At the field, Judy and Jerome were at work clearing the mess. Thomas pushed some troublesome trucks away. "Oh dear, go gently, they said. "I hope this will teach you troublesome trucks a lesson," replied Thomas. Judy and Jerome were about to lift James back onto the rails. "Have you got him at the front there, Judy?" asked Jerome. "Yes, Jerome, ready to lift," she replied. "Me too. Let's go!" They lifted James' main body up in the air. He was worried. You're all right, said Jerome. "We've got you," said Judy. At last, James and his tender were lifted safely onto the track. Sir Topham Hatt came on Edward to make sure that everyone was okay. He was proud. "Well done, Thomas," he said. "Now, I'd like you to take James to the steamworks. Do you know the way?" "Yes, sir. I do, sir," replied Thomas. "It's where I was painted blue." Sir Topham Hatt chuckled. "That's right." So Thomas coupled up to James and took him to the steamworks while Edward and Sir Topham Hatt stayed behind to continue cleaning up the mess. That night at Tidmouth Sheds, Edward, Henry, and at least a dozen workmen were very happy to see Thomas indeed. The workmen cheered as he went on the turntable to turn around and enter his berth. "Well done, Thomas," said Edward. You really were the best engine." Even Gordon seemed impressed. "What you did was terrific," said Henry. "Really useful. That's what I'd say," said Sir Topham Hatt, seeing the engines. "James will have new brakes, a bit of repair here and there, and a new coat of paint. And to you, Thomas, due to your unselfish bravery and heroism, you have shown yourself worthy of having your own branch line." Thomas gasped. "My own branch line?" he asked. Everyone but Gordon congratulated him for the reward. "But who will fetch our coaches for us, sir?" asked Gordon. "Tender engines are not meant to shunt." "I don't know, Gordon," replied Sir Topham Hatt. "Perhaps you'll have to fetch your own until I can get another small engine, like Thomas." But, stammered Gordon. Thomas, Edward, and Henry laughed. A few days later, at the yard, Thomas and Edward were there when another engine came in. They had never seen him like this before, in his red livery and metal brakes. The engine cleared his throat. "James, is that really you?" asked Thomas. "Of course it is," he replied. "How do you like my new paintwork?" "Wow, James, you look splendid," replied Thomas. "I know. Even more splendid than black, as red is the new black," said James. "I'm ready for my coaches." That's when the bad news for him came. "We're Thomas's coaches now, James," said Annie. "That's right," said Clarabel as Thomas whistled. "And he's got his very own branch line, too." James was speechless as Thomas pulled Annie and Clarabel. Edward followed them. "Off to see the world now, Thomas?" he asked. "Yes, Edward, the world of Sodor," he replied as he puffed away with Annie and Clarabel, as Edward stayed in the yard. Thomas saw Gordon napping in Nafret Station when Thomas snuck up on him and whistled loudly. "Wake up, lazy boiler. Really useful engine coming through," he said as he puffed away. "Oh, the indignity," moaned Gordon. Thomas puffed along the countryside and passed by Henry coming the opposite direction. They greeted each other. Thomas's first stop was at Farquhar, where his very first passengers were waiting excitedly to board Annie and Clarabel. On a siding, Thomas saw a coffee pot engine covered in moss and overgrowth. "You must be the new number 1, he said. "I'm Thomas." "Well, look after the branch line, Thomas, and wear that number with pride." "Don't worry, Mr. Coffee Pot, I will. You can count on me," whistled Thomas as he puffed away with the passengers. "But I'm not Mr. Coffee Pot. My name is Glenn," he chuckled. Thomas was happy as can be to finally be starting his new life on the island of Sodor. The adventure had finally begun. And he really is the really useful engine we adore. Next time, a new beginning.